Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida, over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from the October 17, 1919 edition. Bills of Root and Green are not paid. The bills for fees of Constable Chaz A. Green and Justice of the Peace Chaz A. Root at Hastings were not paid, the Board of St. Johns County Commissioners declining to approve them on the grounds that many of the bills were not clear, and in some cases, the costs charged were incorrectly computed. The two officials were requested by the board to appear before the commissioners at the next regular meeting with their records to be checked up. Also at the commission meeting, several communications were received from the State Road Department at Tallahassee, with the result of the board instructing its clerk to notify Chairman Smith of the State Road Department of the regular meeting dates of the St. Johns County Commissioners and invite him to appear before the board at any special or regular session. The sentiment of the board seems to be that unless the State Road Department workers would do less damage and work more systematically than in the past, the roads of this county would be better off without any interference from the state. We don't need their help. We don't want them in here. That State Road Department is a kindergarten pure and simple, were some of the remarks uttered when the letters from the Tallahassee office were read. If the state can use lighter trucks than formerly, will undertake the repairing of the berms of the roads here on its own responsibility, and will show some disposition to cooperate with the county, an amicable adjustment of the differences existing now may be brought about. Otherwise, St. Johns County will work independently of the state and use its influence to have the State Road Department abolished when the next legislature convenes. A large delegation from Elkton also appeared before the board in the interest of a new crossing of the railroad at that point. This is a matter that has been hanging fire since 1914. The board promised the Elkton people to take the necessary steps toward declaring the approaches to the proposed crossing public roads, and the delegation from Elkton, after submitting the petition, left the city encouraged. Also, 3 one-ton Ford trucks to be used in road construction were purchased from St. John's Motor Company for $650 each, the sealed bid of that firm being infinitely more attractive than the single other offer made the board. Dredge is moved to Crescent Lake. Owing to the fact that the dredge work in Deep Creek has been delayed by some trouble in getting right-of-way over land lying immediately adjacent to the creek, and which it will be necessary to dredge into in order to eliminate promontories now jutting into the waterway, the dredge has been moved to Crescent Lake, where some needed work is being done in the interval necessary to secure the right-of-way. The work to be done in Crescent Lake will take about 1 month, and as soon as the dredging there is completed, the outfit will be moved back to Deep Creek to finish the work of making a waterway suitable for merchant craft. This project is of paramount importance to the town, giving, as it will, a deep water outlet for Hastings produce, and it is hoped that the right-of-way matter may be speedily adjusted so that this work may proceed without undue delay. Hastings plans sewerage, paving, fire department, city hall, sidewalks, etc. The members of the town council met this week at a special called meeting for the purpose of discussing the need of municipal improvements, and matters of vital importance to the civic welfare of Hastings were taken up at this session. The routine business, which has been before the council for several meetings, was resumed. The poor sewerage, cleaning of the mains, and the bad condition of the water mains being the principal issues. Mr. Bartlett was instructed to handle the sewer matter as he saw fit, all contracts for necessary work being left to his discretion. The next matter taken up by the town fathers was the question of ways and means necessary to secure permanent and much-needed improvements for the town. The word improvement to embrace a complete system of sewerage, a modern fire department, a municipal hall, combined with jail and firehouse, concrete sidewalks on the principal streets, some of the side streets hard-surfaced, and a practical drainage system installed. Mayor Burt acted as spokesman on this occasion, and his sentiments were heartily endorsed by the council members present. He stated that he believed the only way for Hastings to secure for herself these necessary improvements was to bond for them. Roads and bridges are not to be separated. Although a written opinion was submitted by George W. Bassett, Jr., county attorney, advising that the 2 bridges to the bathing beaches and the road project he placed on the bond election ballot as 3 separate and distinct propositions, the St. Johns County Commissioners in regular meeting at the courthouse Tuesday voted unanimously to submit the matter as a whole, as originally contemplated and decided in the citizens' mass meetings and by the Citizens Committee. Mr. Bassett said there was no law requiring the matter to be separated, but that the bridging of navigable streams was provided for in one statute and the bonding for roads and bridges in another. So he thought it would be advisable to separate the matters on the ballot in view of the fact that they were provided for in different statutes. The county commissioners were unanimous in their decision to go to bat with the proposition on the ballot as a single issue. A good enrollment. Over 60 children were enrolled Monday in the sewing classes to be conducted this year at the Neal Neighborhood House under the auspices of the Neal Neighborhood House Auxiliary. There are to be classes for girls of all ages and sizes, and they are to undertake a great deal of interesting work. Ordered motor hearse. Undertaker R.A. Ponce is expecting a motor hearse shortly, having placed the order for the same some time ago. It has been delayed on account of the unusual labor conditions, but he has been assured that it'll be shipped within the next few weeks. Lewis Point Road, bad. Motorists report that the new road at Lewis Point is in bad condition, and that a number of cars were stalled there on Sunday. At Lewis Point, the road circles, and it is on the circle, it is said, that the cars become stalled. Grooming the parks. In preparation for the winter, the park caretaker is giving the several parks a careful grooming, pruning the trees and trimming the lawns. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in modern newspapers, but also local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of its residents. Here are a few from this edition. A baby daughter. There was born to Mr. and Mrs. Harold Coley on Tuesday, October 14th, a daughter. Congratulations are being extended to them over the little new arrival. Leaving for Okeechobee. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis Meserve leave this evening for Okeechobee after making a brief visit here with the former's parents, Mr. and Mrs. George S. Meserve. Mr. and Mrs. Meserve spent the summer in a most delightful way, making a motor trip through Nova Scotia. They drove in their car southward as far as Washington, D.C., and there disposed of it, making the remainder of the journey to Florida by train. They consider their vacation a genuine success, the week spent in the open as they toured the northern country by auto, proving of the greatest benefit to them both. Returned from auto trip north. Mr. Charles Wilkinson has recently returned from a 4,000-mile trip that he made in his Ford. While away, he visited all of the principal cities and had an enjoyable trip. Mr. Wilkinson, like all Ford enthusiasts, praises the merits of his car and says that he prefers his to anything else in the way of automobiles. Painful accident. Walter Foy, manager of the St. John's Motor Company, was accidentally hurt the first of the week when a tire inflated to about 80 pounds pressure blew off the rim, cutting a gash just over Mr. Foy's eye. He received immediate medical attention, 3 stitches necessary to properly close up the wound. The wound, though painful, is not serious. To visit in Claremont. Mrs. T.B. Glass and little daughter Virginia left last Tuesday for Claremont, Florida, where they go to visit Mr. and Mrs. B. Hughes. Mr. Hughes' health from late reports is steadily improving, and it is stated that he will be able to return to Hastings in the near future, as his stay in Claremont has proved very beneficial. Spent day in Jacksonville. Mr. and Mrs. C.W. Malty motored to Jacksonville last Monday, where they spent the day shopping, returning home that night. New resident. Mr. C.M. Bazemore of Millen, Georgia, arrived in Hastings Monday and intends to make Hastings his home, having accepted a position with the Hastings Drug Corporation as pharmacist. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time, a 1919 hit, Bill Murray with You'd Be Surprised.
Johnny was bashful and shy. Nobody understood why. Mary loved him. All the other girls passed him by. Everyone wanted to know how she could pick such a beau with a twinkle in her eye. She made this reply: he's not so good in a crowd, but when you get him alone, you'd be surprised. He's kind of scared in a mob, but when he talks on the phone, you'd be surprised. He doesn't look like much of a lover, but you can't judge a book by its cover. He's got the face of an angel, but there's a devil in his eye. He's such a delicate thing, but when he squeezes your hand, you'd be surprised. He's scared to death in a boat, but when you get him on land, you'd be surprised. At a party or at a ball, I must admit he's nothing at all, but when he takes you home, you'd be surprised. Mary continued to praise Johnny's remarkable ways to the ladies, and you know advertising pays. Now Johnny's never alone. He has the busiest phone almost every other day, and you girl will say he's not so good in a crowd, but when you get him alone, you'd be surprised. He's kind of scared in a mob, but when he talks on the phone, you'd be surprised. I know he looks as slow as the Erie, but you don't know the half of it, dearie. He's got the face of an Eskimo, but there's fire in his eyes. He doesn't say very much, but when he starts into talk, you'd be surprised. He isn't much standing still, but when we're out for a walk, you'd be surprised. I'll admit he doesn't look smart. He won't impress you right from the start, but in a week or two, you'd be surprised.